And I just want to say, so if people are interested, right, in kind of exploring more visualization, of course you have lots of kind of sources online, but we made this kind of website called Cultures, and it kind of came out from me teaching these topics, and then I even tried to, right here I am trying to talk about genres, even though I just criticized it. But there's a source page, and then here it's not completely up to date, but we'll update it this summer. There's some kind of list of a few articles exist about this field. Again, it's not completely up to date. And there's also a list of some data resources, and there's also just software tools for visualization. And here's, for example, not all, but here's, some tools. Then, of course, you have various kind of programming environments. So, of course, if you know programming, you can more, but it's also more complicated. But I would say the main tools would be Google Docs, Mini-Ice, Swivel. And there are also kind of tools here and where. So there's a particular tool to do timelines, right? Same thing. Okay. Any people who haven't spoken, guys, this is your chance. There's a couple of people who didn't say anything, which makes me really worried. That you have like this big bomb, nuclear bomb in your pocket.
Are you looking at me?
Well, no, I'm not looking at you spoke, but there's like a couple of people. Okay, but yeah, okay. Well, just want to make sure we don't shut you out of the conversation. Okay. Well, now it's open to everybody, so.
Cultural analytics.
I wanted
Okay,
to
now.
I had a couple questions earlier, and I even wrote them down. So what I gather what you're doing is you're developing a taxonomy of cultural production using software synth analysis, which is a kind of, and specifically you're looking at stylistic cladistics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's my understanding.
Well,
and you're using
but I want to say, like, you give me lots of credit. I'm not really developing it because that will be like a very big project.
okay.
I'm just exploring the idea.
Pointing at
Like, would it be kind of, what would happen if we do it, and theoretical benefits, right?
And then it says
Yeah.
that I wrote, you're using, well, one thing I'd like to comment on about your idea about DNA.
Yes.
DNA is a coding mechanism, so biological systems can develop and sustain themselves in order to make more biological DNA systems.
Right.
So there's, while I think that there's a certain analog, because these things are not self-seeking organisms, there's a real breakdown in the usefulness of that kind of analogy. I think that it has its value, but I also think that there's really serious detriments. The other thing, these taxonomies that you have are points of output, at least in my model.
Yeah. It's like outputs which you can study, think about.
So as your material output devices innovate, then speciation arrives ex nihilo. So you invent the TV screen and suddenly, bingo, you're getting a whole new pile of taxonomies. They just arrive out of the output device. Like color Xerox gives you a taxonomy.
How so?
There's the whole thing of color Xerox art. So there's an appearance, there's all these signifiers associated with color Xerox as opposed to black and white Xerox. Or as opposed to the nickel that you dump into the microfilm reader. You get the thermal print. I mean, there's all these different kinds of things that become things that you can then associate with.
I see.
So
what you're saying is that let's not exclusively focus on the production environment. Let's also think about media in terms of its different output devices, output
well,
platforms.
I think that
what I call exhibition platforms.
What I'm saying is that the output devices or your platforms are creating the signifiers by which you're measuring all this by. So you create a new system of output, and then you're going to suddenly have an explosion of speciation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Quite possibly the language could be territorializing this.
Mm-hmm. And I also wrote down musical styles and creative styles also function as markers for the human mating ritual and hold a social function. Aesthetics and other stylistics are subject to similar social forces. So I'm wondering about the usefulness of this kind of analysis when you're basically dealing with human hormones. I mean, and also there's a problem also how marketing systems
Yeah.
can change these things. Media are also subject to social utility. For instance, the CD versus downloading files, which resulted in the death of the high-definition CD. There was this whole idea of like
Formats.
so there's this whole
format wars.
exactly, but by downloading, basically evacuated, they hollowed out the money in the CD production. So there will be no more development of CD audio of any significance. So we don't know what would happen in 30 years if we were still spinning little plastic discs in players, because that's been precluded by the download thing, which is, again, part of a social dynamic, which is, again, predicated on hormones and reproduction and all this kind of happy
But let's
stuff.
look at the positive sides of that. That we've now deterritorialized all of the media output.
But in terms of these cladistics, though, it's problematizing the kind of enumeration of these kinds of things, and also it reduces the predictive quality, predictive usage.
Territorialized either, because it's not
Can you say
deterritorialized.
that again?
I don't believe it's really deterritorialized because everything's on the territory of the network.
Yeah, it just shifted
Instead of
from a
being
record store
separate-
to a.
Yeah, it's separate institutions and separate equipment like a CD player or.
Now that's in heavy metal. and people
I'm
don't
saying,
stop.
for example, that I can be my own producer. I don't have to go and seek a record label if I was making music. I can produce my music and I can distribute my music.
Mhm.
And so we've eliminated.
But you can't advertise it, nor can you separate it from the glut of information out there. That is an issue that we're coming up to today. So, in other words, unless you're already known, it's difficult to become known. Except maybe through some sort of like creative commons.
What I'm talking about that is just deterritorializing.
Deterritorializing the means of production.
Also, I pointed out that some styles are false styles. So you can talk about, I don't know, Art Deco skyscrapers, you can talk about Mies van der Rohe wall of mirrors, you can talk about some postmodern thing. You know what it is? It's just a big pile of steel with rooms in it, okay? And it's still an ugly skyscraper. So it's functionally a big, giant box.
Right.
It doesn't matter how you paint it up or what kind of glass you put in it. It's still a big, ugly box. So whether you could be talking about these kind of stylistic,
Yeah.
the trappings, like you're painting it different, but it's really not different. It's just a different way to package the same crap that's been going for 100 years.
Well, no, it's
Well,
not
it depends how you look at it,
the
though.
package
Well,
because
it depends.
the Art Deco came out of new technical innovations
Yeah.
that appeared at that time.
Still.
Steel, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a way to promote the steel industry, to experiment with various applications and new technology. So it's actually, I mean, you can look back at it. Okay, well, a box is a box is a box.
Yeah.
If you're against boxes, or if you feel like there's too many boxes, we should explore round buildings with round rooms in them. But
Or
I mean,
teepees.
or TVs.
Yeah, okay, see, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
You can radically reapproach any of these things.
Yeah. So you think it's giving too much credence or too much importance to dominant forms?
Exactly. And then another important thing, which sort of touches on what happened yesterday, which is another fundamental part of computer science. Beyond input, processing, output is GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. So if you put a bunch of data in that's uncorrelated or partial, and then process it, you're going to get the same pile of crap out of it.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be really that useful. This also further goes to another really interesting problem, which is what I call the failure of anthropology. You can't, technically anthropology wants to understand all of the cultures of humanity.
Yeah.
The problem is if you go out to certain cultures and you try to understand them, you completely destroy them. So as
Yes.
a consequence, it's an impossible project. This also results in my next point, which is that it goes to these are stylistic issues